Every time that we say we're going to record our next episode at a specific day, some shit always goes down, including today. Welcome to Pucks and Brews, everyone. I'm your host, Michael Sparacino, alongside, as always, Liam the Chellmaster Godimer. And, well, let's just basically get right down into it. The New York Rangers have acquired Vladimir Tarasenko in an epic trade with the St. Louis Blues. I mean, there's other parts to the trade, but Liam, we got Vladimir Tarasenko. Cheers, buddy.
Fuck yeah. Cheers to that. Apologies for the, pardon my French. But you know what?
Don't worry about it.
Trade. Yeah, this is Pucks and Brews, baby. We can drop all the fucks, shit, so whatever.
Fuck,
but you
shits,
know what?
Bitches, yep.
All right. And you know who gets bitches? Probably Vladimir Tarasenko, especially since he's in New York now. But I'm so happy to have this player, Shades. I mean, Vladimir Tarasenko is a Stanley Cup champion. And you know what? I think that matters. And there were two Stanley Cup champions that would have fit in on our right side. And that's Patrick Kane and Tarasenko. And I think the Rangers chose the right player. And you know what? You got a player at a reasonable cap hit, right? He's making around $7.5 million.
And the Rangers got him at 50% retention.
Right? And then you look
double
at the
cheers.
Double cheers. Fuck yeah. But then, you know, you see the package that the Rangers gave back. And you know what? For a player of that magnitude, I'm sure we'll get into it later. I think the Chris Drury did quite well. And you know what, Shades? I want to give you a special shout out because I saw you on Twitter today and you had a tweet. And I don't know if I liked it in the moment, but it was a top 5 tweet I've seen in quite a while. You said Chris Drury in the offseason trading is what? Shit. And
Complete
then Chris Drury ass. And then Chris Drury in the regular season.
During the trade deadline.
During the trade deadline. God. I couldn't have put it any better myself, Shades. So I'm very happy we have the player and the Rangers have finally solidified their forward core, something they needed to do for a while.
I'm going to triple cheers to that because I never get complimented on my Twitter game. So thank you.
You're welcome. Well deserved.
So let's actually go down into the entire trade and break it all down right here. The New York Rangers acquire, obviously, Vladimir Tarasenko at a 50% cap retention, which is $3.75 million out of 7.5, a full 7.5. And they also get defenseman Niko Mikkola in exchange for Sammy Blais. Cheers, number 4. My good friend. Defenseman prospect, Hunter Skinner, a 2023 conditional first-round pick, and a 2024 conditional fourth-round pick. The conditions being the 2023 first being the worst of the two because the Rangers have Dallas's first-round pick this year because of the Niels Lundqvist trade. The condition on that being, I saw something else about it being a top 10 protected, either top 10 protected or protected from Dallas missing the playoffs, which, long story short, not going to happen. It's going to be a 2023 first. And the condition on the fourth round pick, the condition states, if the Rangers make the playoffs in 2023, the fourth round pick becomes a third round pick. They're making the playoffs. It's going to be a 2023 first and a 2024 fourth, 2024 third. Now, there's many different avenues we can go down on this one, but let's talk about the first thing. We get 2 players. What do Vladimir Tarasenko and Niko Mikkola bring to this team? I'll answer that first. Tarasenko brings a top 6 bona fide star right winger, 6-time 30-goal scorer, a caliber player that this team desperately needed from the moment that they traded Pavel Buchnevich. And they also get a third pair defenseman in Niko Mikkola, which is another area of the team that needed addressing. And they addressed it. They addressed 2 areas of need in one trade. Liam, floor is yours.
Put it really well, Shades. And just a couple off of that, you know, you mentioned that Vladimir Tarasenko has 6 30-plus goal seasons under his belt, and he's just a year removed from a season in 75 games where he put up 34 goals, 48 assists for 82 points. That was his best season in quite a while. And there was a question mark, right? Whether Tarasenko is going to be the same player following shoulder surgery. And I think last year he showed you that he is back to being the same player. So you put it very well. The Rangers have a top 6 right winger now that they desperately needed ever since they ironically traded Pavel Buchnevich to the St. Louis Blues, a move that Chris Drury probably should have waited till the trade deadline to make, right? Since he makes all his best trades at the deadline, as you mentioned in your tweet. Everybody follow Shades on Twitter. I'm sure he'll drop his Twitter handle in the description or something. But yeah, Tarasenko is a great player. He's going to play alongside Artemi Panarin. And look, there's no better player, no better winger in the league who facilitates the puck like Artemi Panarin. And if he can get that puck on the tape of Vladimir Tarasenko, not only on the power play, 5-on-5, it helps in so many areas that the Rangers need to improve upon that it's just a slam dunk. And as far as Niko Mikkola, I think it's a little bit of an underrated move, right? I think Mikkola is a 6'4" defenseman. He has a lot of size under his belt. And he's somebody who can slide in on that third pair, can get sheltered a little bit, can provide a little bit of mentoring to Braden Schneider and help him become a better player as well. And depth is so important in the playoffs. And Shades, I'm sure we'll talk more about it as the episode goes on. But if you have 3 pairs of defensemen that you can trust at any time, meaning Fox and Lindgren, Trouba and Miller, and now Mikkola and Schneider. And then you have Ben Harper, who you just extended for 2 years, who has played really well since getting called up from the American Hockey League. Shades, if I'm going into the playoffs with those 7 men as my defensemen, I'm a happy camper. So
same, especially after, the whole Patrick Nemeth fiasco last year. I'm very happy with where this defense core is at this point in time.
And Hayek is no longer a Ranger. It finally happened.
I was going to bring that up later, but fuck it. You spilled the beans. Libor Hayek
I did spill the beans.
on
I'm
waivers.
sorry.
No, I love it. Libor Hayek on waivers, something that should have been done literally before last season, but it finally happened. Better late than never.
But you know what, Shades? I think that this is very key for the Rangers and their front office because Chris Drury realized that Hayek was not going to be good enough going into the playoffs. And you know what? I think a lot of the worry from Ranger fans was, well, they're not, putting Hayek on waivers, which means that they clearly still see something in the player, which means that he'll get opportunities to play. And if you put him out there in the playoffs, he might, have a bad play lead to, a tough goal against. And this is Chris Drury saying, I'm looking at my team. I'm looking at my roster. I realize Hayek is not good enough. Let me call St. Louis and not only get Tarasenko, but get a third pairing defenseman as well. And I think Drury also took advantage of the Blues because the Blues have some of the best defensive depth in the league. Mikkola, to be able to take him out and get him out of that trade. Look, let me put it this way. You haven't divulged what the return is going to be yet, but if we sent the same players, picks, and prospects to the Blues and didn't get Mikkola back and it was just Tarasenko, I think I would have been just as fine with the trade. So, the fact that we got Mikkola too is a nice add-in.
Yeah, and actually, funny enough, I just looked up because I forgot what St. Louis's defensive core was. Mikkola was arguably the 5th defenseman because, they still have a pretty decent team, St. Louis. It's just they get no goaltending. So, which is, then again, they did win a Stanley Cup. So, the fan base probably isn't too overly mad.
Right. And you know what? And from the St. Louis side of things, just in regard to Tarasenko, this was a player that without a doubt was leaving in the offseason in 3 months. And you know what? If the Blues were in a playoff chase right now, I guess it would have been a little bit different, the mentality going into the deadline. But Shades, I think the writing was on the wall, going back to earlier in the season when they were, struggling heavily. And they move on from Tarasenko. And again, haven't talked about what the return is, but even if it seemed a little light, from the NHL fans' perspective, I think that the fact that they got something of value for a player that was without a doubt leaving in free agency, that's a small win for St. Louis. Give them credit where it's due.
I'm actually was going to transition right into that because let's talk about the return for a second. The Rangers give up Sammy Blais. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, please. They give up defensive prospect Hunter Skinner, which he was a 4th round pick in the 2019 draft, selected 112 overall. I don't know much about him as a prospect, but
I do.
before I
I
throw
can
it
tell
to
you now.
you, before I throw it to you
Yep.
on Hunter Skinner, who he is as a player and as a prospect, it was very clear that he had absolutely no future in the organization with the defensive core that is currently on the team.
Absolutely right. And you know what? When you look at your top 4 defensemen, they're all locked up, right? Outside of Lindgren. Lindgren has 2 more years left on his deal. Fox is locked up long term. Trouba, we can talk about it for days. Miller is going to be locked up long term.
He
And you
better
know,
be.
Schneider and are 2 players that are going to earn themselves a new contract as well. So I'm totally with you, Shades. And as far as Hunter Skinner is concerned, I spent a lot of time in the ECHL, you know, and he plays for the Jacksonville Icemen, of course, the affiliate with the New York Rangers. And Hunter Skinner, when he was actually earlier in the season brought down from the Hartford Wolfpack to the Jacksonville Icemen, they were playing the Savannah Ghost Pirates that night, and I was able to sit and watch that game. And he's a good puck moving defenseman. Now, he looked good in the ECHL, so you can take that with a grain of salt. But you know what? I think 2019 is still, you know, not long enough ago to where St. Louis can say, okay, you know what? This kid only has 3 years of development under his belt, former 4th-round pick, can skate well, can move the puck decently. You know, let's try and bring him in. But as far from a prospect point of view for the Rangers in terms of who they gave up, because this is the only prospect they gave up in the deal. I mean, wow. Like, Shades, you know, you could tell me what you think. In the moment, I thought Kravtsov was a blue. I really did.
I
Like
was
when the trade,
extremely scared that he was also.
you know, and the fact that you go from Kravtsov, who's a former 9th overall pick, to giving up Hunter Skinner, who was just a 4th-round pick. You know, Chris Drury did really, really well here.
Oh, yes. Yes, he did.
And Hunter
Absolutely.
Skinner had no future. Hunter Skinner had no future with this team either, so it's a wash.
No, which is not
You
to
know,
say that he's a terrible prospect. It's just that, I mean, the Rangers actually know how to develop defensemen, which is ironic because they can't develop skilled forwards for shit outside of one every like 8 years.
hey, number 72 is kind of developing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's who I'm referring to.
There you go. And I'd say 24 and 13, but again, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So okay. So remember how I said I had something to say that wasn't exactly a hot take, but it was more
I'm
of
ready.
a elation comes down a little bit. Let's be a little more even keeled and give a less biased opinion.
Yep.
So you did bring this up a couple minutes ago. Tarasenko 100% was done with St. Louis. No chance of him re-signing. Teams 100% knew this around the league. Every team knew this. That itself, however minute it may be, will drive down trade value. Like I said, however minute it may be, because you know there's no chance of the player returning. He's having somewhat of a down year, points and goal wise, because he's coming off, like we said earlier, was it 34 goals and 80?
34 goals, 48 assists for 82 points last year.
Yeah, which is fun fact. His first point per game season in the NHL last year. He currently has 10 goals and 19 assists for 29 points in 38 games. So he has missed 13 games. And if you even or try and I need my brain to work right now so I could think of words. If you try and pace the season out for Tarasenko based on the amount of games he's missed, he is on pace to score less than 20 goals, or was on pace to score less than 20 goals, which kind of sort of raises a red flag. But at the same time, if the plan is to put him with Artemi Panarin, that should not be an issue.
You know, Shades, it's something I really didn't think about until you brought it up. He is on pace for 20 goals. He's on pace for 60 points. And, you know, maybe some of that is skewed by his last 5 games since returning from injury. Well, actually, yes, since returning from injury, he hasn't played in 9 days, but he did come back prior to the All-Star break, but he has no points in his last 5 games. But I know I really wouldn't be worried, to be honest. I mean, I would be absolutely stunned if Vladimir Tarasenko and Artemi Panarin don't put up a shit ton of points together. because not only do you have that Russian connection, but I mentioned it in the open as well. I mean, Panarin finds teammates better than anybody, and Tarasenko is going to be a mainstay on that power play. Let's also talk about that too. How about the embarrassment of riches the Rangers now have on the power play? Somebody's got to go. Probably gonna be Trocheck, but still, it was still a pretty talented group to begin with. But yeah, it's a little bit of a down year, but I would be a little bit more concerned if last year he didn't have that explosion where he averaged a point per game and got 82 points, because before that it was 10 points, 14 points, although injury riddled season in 2019, 2020, and 2020, 2021. So the fact that he had that big year last year, even though he's struggling a little bit this season, succumbing to some injuries as well, I'm not really worried, to be honest.
Now,
and I think Drury did the right thing going for it.
Now, what was his line? What were his two most common line mates last season? Was it Buchnevich and Barbashev?
No, it was O'Reilly and Thomas. And
Okay.
Thomas really elevated his game. Robert Thomas did a lot of the things that Panarin's going to do for him, because, again, he's a very good passer of the puck. And, of course, O'Reilly, we know how good of a two-way player he is, and, how he's able to use his body, to create separation and stuff like that. So, yeah, it was a good line for him. And let's also note this. Tarasenko's had a little bit of down year, 10 goals, 19 assists, 29 points in 38 games. Ryan O'Reilly's been injured very often this season, and so is Robert Thomas. They've both missed a bunch of games. So I don't really think it's a coincidence that you're changing Tarasenko's line mates due to injury and he has a drop-off in his production.
Yeah. Funny. Here's another fun fact. So Pavel Buchnevich has 15 goals and 23 assists for 38 points in 38 games. So it looks like him and Tarasenko missed the same amount of games, which, okay. I just decided to look his stats up just because, I'm a big Buchnevich guy. And I'm just going to look up Kairu's stats real quick, because I know he's been having a monster season as well. Kairu has 47 points in 48 games. So other players have picked up the slack where he left off, or not where he left off. That's not the phrase I'm looking for. Where he wasn't picking it up compared to last year.
Right. And I just think it's, there could be a lot of factors that go into it. I think different line mates is definitely one of them. I think Buchnevich coming in as well is also another factor. You add a top 6 winger who is reaching the peak of his development and putting him onto your team and expecting him to produce and score goals alongside, might I add, Jordan Kyrou, who's a very similar player, also reaching his offensive peak. So I just think maybe the Blues had an embarrassment of riches up front, and the opportunities Tarasenko was getting when he was the guy, not only last year, but also when the Blues won the Stanley Cup in 2019. It's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. And all right. So we've talked a lot about Vladimir Tarasenko. Let's dive into Niko Mikkola stats, which is great name, by the way.
What a great name. I can't wait to see to hear Sam Rosen butcher that. No, I think it'll be okay. I think it'll be all right.
See, now I have something to look forward to even more tomorrow night.
Niko Mikkola.
Okay, so Mikkola is currently 26 years old, is going to be 27 on April 27th. His career high is 13 points in 54 games last season. So they did not acquire him for offensive purposes. They definitely acquired him for depth purposes, maybe a little bit of a veteran presence to help Schneider. You can't say full on veteran presence, because he's 26. And this is his 4th season.
Yeah. He's still decently young, but he's young in the NHL. You just said it's his 4th season. He entered the league at 23 years old. So, although the body might have a little bit more wear and tear, how he's adjusted to the NHL game, maybe there's a little bit more to unlock. That's all I'm saying. And, it reminds me a lot of the acquisition of Justin Braun at last year's trade deadline. Of course, Braun is a real veteran. He's closer to 35, 36, 37 years old. But again, you're bringing in a defenseman with size and somebody who can help a young player develop, and get better in Braden Schneider. And I think that's the big key for the Rangers. They see something in Braden Schneider. I think we all see something in Braden Schneider.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? Putting a defensive defenseman with size, somebody who can protect him and somebody who can also help on the special teams, not on the power play, obviously, but Niko Mikkola is one of the best defensemen, penalty killing defensemen in the league. He'll help teach Braden Schneider, a little bit of that side of the game as well. So really, it's a slam dunk. When I saw that Mikkola was added to this deal, or part of this deal rather, I was really jumping for joy, because it was a 2-for-1, they needed a depth defenseman. They needed a top 6 forward, and you get it both in the same trade, and you don't give up prospects like Othman, Cooley, Kravtsov, and it ends up being Hunter Skinner, who's a guy that me and you didn't forget about because we're hardcore Ranger fans. But if you would ask a casual Ranger fan, probably don't even know who that guy is.
Yeah, that's a good point. So before I transition into line combinations after following the trade, let's talk about the specific value of the return that St. Louis got. Or did we already hit on that? Because my brain is like fried.
We hit on it lightly, but we can go a little bit more in depth on it. I touched on it, but I don't think you gave an analysis.
All right. Well, if I did, I apologize. So you're going to listen to it again, everyone. Like I said, brain is scrambled eggs. So you're looking at Tarasenko, a guy who had no future. The minute trade value thing of him knowing teams knowing he's going to not re-sign in St. Louis. It takes the trade value from here and it brings it ever so slightly down to here. And the fact that you gave up a first, a third, a roster player, and a prospect. Now, granted, the Rangers did get a defenseman along in this deal as well. That is not exactly horrible trade value for a 31 game rental player. Yeah, 31. That's not exactly horrible trade value, but I still think the Rangers made out like bandits just because I'm obviously going to be a little bit biased.
Yeah, I think they made out like bandits too. I mean, the 3rd round pick is obviously nice, and of course getting the condition on that, an easy condition if the Rangers make the playoffs, which is something that they're obviously going to do. Yeah, they got the later of the 1st round picks between Dallas and the Rangers, and I guess that's not the worst thing in the world because
honestly, all things considered, the picks are probably going to be within like 4 or 5 of each other. So,
right, yeah, that's what just about to say that. They're going to be very close to one another. So the fact that you're getting the later pick, is not the worst thing. But also, if the Rangers, if they look, this trade looks better and better as far as they go in the playoffs. If they win the Stanley Cup, it's a slam dunk. You give them the 32nd overall pick, which essentially is 2 second-round picks and a low-level prospect. 1 second-round pick, 1 third-round pick, and a low-level prospect for a rental player that helped win you a Stanley Cup and a depth defenseman who is on a contract that you can bring him in next year as well. So from the St. Louis side, again, it's not the worst thing in the world. I can put it actually very simple. You know how St. Louis fans should feel right now? Exactly how we felt when Pavel Buchnevich was traded for Sammy Blais and a 2nd-round pick. Very similar, decent, but an underwhelming return.
I don't feel the same because Buchnevich was an RFA at the time.
That's fair. Yeah. But I also think then this came out after the trade was announced. The Rangers are going to extend Tarasenko. Like Frank Saravelli came out and said that, you should expect them to at least talk about it, So
I would expect them to talk about it, but realistically, how realistic
you get him on a 3-year deal? If you get him on a 3-year deal and he lights it up with Panarin, I don't know. I mean, it would probably necessitate a trade of one of your young players, because it's going to be tough, right? Because Hedel and Lafreniere and Kako all coming into their own. You got to pay Keandre Miller as well. But I just wouldn't keep that out of the question that the Rangers might extend them. I think they could make it work. If short-term deal.
Yeah, according to the Rangers Cap Friendly, their projected cap hit is 82, basically 82.4. Current cap space 272,000 and change. Deadline cap space 415,000 and change. And today's cap hit 84.5 and change. That is not factoring in Hayek being sent down because of the whole waiver process. So that number should go down. And they currently, or after Hayek goes down, they will have 13 forwards, 7 defensemen, and 2 goalies on the roster. So, yeah, I'm not going to say Drury's done because I still think they need to either trade a lower level prospect or a late round pick for a depth forward, like a 12th, 13th guy.
Let's get Tyler Mott back, baby. Let's bring him back.
They should have never let him walk in the first place.
They should have never let him walk in the first place. Exactly right.
So,
and
no,
one thing I just want to mention. I'm just looking at the cap friendly page for the Rangers right now. And, if the Rangers are going to consider extending Vladimir Tarasenko, I think it's important to look at who they could potentially move, to clear up some space. And Shades, unfortunately.
The problem becomes all the no movement clauses and the modified no trade clauses.
It's got to be Barclay Goodrow.
Barclay
Goodrow.
Barclay Goodrow has, for some reason, a 15-team no trade clause. And that is it throughout the length of the contract. Why?
Yeah, the only positive is that there's 17 other teams that you could trade him to.
This is true, but the point I brought up to my friend is you basically, at the time of a hypothetical trade, you have to basically eliminate all the teams that are in major cap crunches. So players realize that and know not to include those teams in the no trade or the submitting of the list of the no trade list. So the number becomes smaller than 17 very quickly.
I'm going to put out a prediction right here about a team that I think could acquire Barclay Goodrow. Ready for this? Tampa Bay.
Interesting.
They need depth. They love him. They love him in Tampa Bay. Want a Stanley Cup with him.
Only problem is they just made it to the Cup final without him.
Well, I think they're going to be looking to add. And I think those bottom 6 guys that can play in your top 6. Remember, they gave up 2 first-round picks for a player in Brandon Hagel last year.
I apologize. I'm laughing because I looked at Tampa's projected cap hit and today's cap hit. Holy shit. They are so far above. Oh my God.
What is their cap?
88.
What's their deadline cap?
719,000. How does this make any sense?
Like I said, I didn't think they were going to acquire him this year, but if I think they would have some interest in bringing him back. Maybe San Jose has some interest in bringing him back. He was a fan favorite with the Sharks. Of course, had that famous overtime winner against Marc-Andre Fleury.
In what ended up being like one of the most memorable Game 7s in all of sports the last several years.
I think that was one of the best hockey games I've ever seen. But Shades, unfortunately, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this cap friendly page, and then we can move on from the conversation because I know we've been talking about it for a little bit here. Unfortunately, Vincent Trocheck is a black hole.
That's how it's looking so far this season. I'm not disagreeing with you one bit.
I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, but when you look at this roster, Panarin's not going anywhere. Zibanejad's not going anywhere. Kreider, Rangers would be dicks if they traded Kreider.
I don't know about dicks, but
Yeah.
He's hard.
Philip.
He's another one that's hard to move. Actually,
Yep.
ooh,
Philip
wait a second.
Hedel.
Wait a flippin' oh no, never mind. Never mind. He doesn't have a modified no trade until 2024. Yeah.
Right. You're not trading VC. You just extended him. Gauthier doesn't make that much money at all. Decision, same thing. Kravtsov, same thing. Lafreniere, you're going to have to pay. He's ELC is over this year. Kako, you're keeping. Like, you look at the defense. Trouba's going nowhere. Fox is going nowhere. Did they give up on Lindgren? Like, I'd be hard pressed to do that.
Well, that's a conversation
So,
for another day.
yeah, but it looks like Trocheck's a black hole on this roster. But hopefully they'll be able to re-sign Tarasenko. That's the point.
Yeah, I would be amazed at how they would be able to do that, but time will tell. So let's transition into the last thing about the Rangers this episode, and basically the episode entirely, because that's what this is the only reason we're recording. What do the line combinations look like following this trade starting tomorrow night at the time of this recording against the game? Oh my God, in the game against Seattle. I told you I cannot talk today. So
It's all right. It happens.
yes, you did ask me a question right before we started recording. What are my ideal lines? And right now, I will give you the answer. So you were referencing a tweet, and then I found the tweet and sent it, or excuse me, took a screenshot of it. And my preferred lines are second line, kid line, self-explanatory. Fourth line, VC Goodrow, and a combination of Gauthier or Lecision. Gauthier or, basically. And first line, Panarin, Zibanejad, Tarasenko. Third line, take a guess, Chris Kreider, Vincent Trocheck, and Vitaly Kravtsov. I did that so out of order, but let me just say that I'll say it one more time. First line of Panarin, Zibanejad, Tarasenko. Second line of the kid line, Laf, Hedel, Kako. Third line, Kreider, Trocheck, and Kravtsov. And the fourth line, VC on the left or right, centered by Goodrow, and then interchange one of Lecision and Gauthier.
I like it. I would make one change. I just think Kreider, Trocheck, and VC was a really good line, and I would bring it back. I really would. Kreider and Trocheck work really well off each other. It's one of the few players that Trocheck seems to be able to click with on the Rangers. And VC is such a good defensive forward that I don't want to put him on the fourth line. But again, I understand it. And in my scenario, Vitaly Kravtsov would be scratched. So I don't want Kravtsov to be scratched. I want him to play. I want him to develop. But I think we have to call a spade a spade. Shades, is Vitaly Kravtsov being put into the lineup in a playoff game by Gerard Gallant after he, scratched Capo Kako in game 7 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, game 6 against Lightning, excuse me.
I don't know, I'm going to keep going back to this point. Kravtsov did nothing to warrant getting continuously healthy scratched.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. I agree with that. I actually think he's looked pretty good in the lineup, but I'm just saying Gallant he's just rough on the young players, man. He doesn't give them a lot of leeway. And when they make one little mistake or, get away from the game or the small details, your time in the lineup is short-lived. So, but the Rangers have significant depth in the forward group now, good for them.
Yeah. And which is kind of shocking because remember earlier in the season how we were talking about how the lines are all over the place and we're missing like 2 to 3 players. Tarasenko automatically basically just erases 2 problems because he fills a hole that was there because of the Buchnevich trade, as we brought up. And also with him in the top 6, you literally have a skilled forward potential forward with skill and a 9th overall pick in Vitaly Kravtsov, who, for the love of God, literally just play him at this point so you know what you have in him.
Or trade him. Just
Or
moving
yeah,
for
do
another
what like
prospect
do
that's
just
not.
make up your freaking mind already.
I wouldn't mind like, look, can I ask you one more thing before we end this episode? And it just surfaced into my brain right now.
Hit me.
Vitaly Kravtsov for Tanner Jeannot is a trade that Chris Drury needs to make right now.
Only reason I'm gonna say no to that is because Jeannot is having a very disappointing sophomore season.
But he transforms that bottom six, man. I mean, if you can put Jeannot on that fourth line,
Is Jeannot a fourth
maybe
line
if they
player
threw a
though?
pick back at us too, Look, sophomore slumps happen all the time. Tanner Jeannot was really good in his rookie year.
Yes, he
and
was.
now there's no place for Kravtsov. I'm sorry. I'm not playing him on the fourth line. You have him on the third line, which is okay, but I don't think Gallant is going to put him on the third line. I think what Larry Brooks said, and I know Chris Drury read that article. I don't know. I would really, really jump for joy if the Rangers made that trade. And I don't even care that Kravtsov is a former number 9 overall pick. This is a guy with an attitude problem. This is a guy that didn't want to be here for the longest time. And this is a guy that's been unable to stay in the lineup. And you know what, Shades? As
Actually,
much as me,
the funny thing about this, the attitude problem, in my opinion, was completely overblown because you haven't heard a peep about that this entire season, which is telling.
and maybe he's adjusted, and that's a good thing. And that's a testament to him.
Now,
But,
granted,
my last
remember
thing,
what I said at the time that and I think, was it you or was it my friend Mike who said that he should not have been sent down both years?
I think, yeah, no, I thought he should have gotten NHL playing time, especially when the Rangers needed depth.
Okay, so that it was both of you then? Yeah,
Mhm.
so he has not been dealt a good hand, Kravtsov.
Right. But and I also want to point out, as much as me and you watch the Rangers and, we enjoy, watching Kravtsov and definitely see potential in him, there's been many moments in his career where I'm like, okay, this kid's definitely got something. We're not NHL coaches, at the end of the day. Gerard Gallant, I'll succumb to him. He knows the game better than I do. And you know what? If he, as much as fans get up in arms about lineup decisions and all, he's been a coach in this league for a long time. Sometimes coaches are wrong, but myself as a fan, I'm just like, maybe I see something that he doesn't, or vice versa. But I like Kravtsov, and I want him to get his chance. I really do. But I think in Nashville, he will. And Tanner Jeannot is a player that every team would like to add for a playoff push. So even if they throw a pick back to make it even, but I just think that's something to keep an eye on.
My buddy just sent me a text of the Tarasenko insane goal at MSG from either 2014 or 2015.
Oh, the one-handed goal on Cam Talbot.
Yes, which
I
I was
remember that.
actually at that game.
Were you? And
Yes, I
they
was,
won that
and I
game,
had
didn't they?
fucking great seats.
Or did they lose that game? Did they win?
I'm pretty
I thought
sure they
won.
lost that game in a shootout.
The shootout.
Yeah, no, that was I paid like $80 for that game. I was like 16th row.
That's so dope, man.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, I remember the Rangers.
my buddy got a very good deal on that game.
And then I think he scored another one-handed goal a few years later.
He probably did.
Another beauty at the Garden. But yeah, definitely good to have him on the right side.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to, before I, do the outro, I do have to say this since you brought it up. Gallant probably does, or actually, no, he definitely knows a lot about hockey because you're not going to be a head coach in the NHL without a shit ton of hockey knowledge. But there are some times, and this goes to coaches across the league and basically in every sport, they see something in a player for some reason when that player clearly does not bring anywhere near as much to the lineup that they think that that particular head coach thinks. And sometimes it's vice versa. They don't see something in a player and a player gets traded and then they flourish with another team. Sometimes fans know what they're talking about. Other times we clearly don't. But there is a reason why he has not lasted more than 3 years as a head coach in the NHL. So there is that.
Yeah, Shades, I definitely think that's fair. Don't get me wrong, and I think there's good points of view for both sides of the argument. And I don't want anybody to get it misconstrued to think that I'm sitting here and saying that Kravtsov is not a good player. I like Kravtsov a lot. I want him to get his chances. If I had it my way, honestly, I'd have Panarin and Kravtsov playing together all year until they figured it out. Seriously, I wouldn't have switched it up. I know it's kind of stereotypical, whatever you want to call it, to put the Russians together. But you know what? It works. You know what? And if that's who Kravtsov is most comfortable with, Panarin's the most skilled player on the team. So if anybody's going to be able to help unlock that, it's Artemi. So my point is, I like Kravtsov as a player a lot. I think he's going to be a very good player. But I just think for me, he doesn't fit that the Rangers need. We have so many young players that are developing and that aren't where they're supposed to be yet, and we're just waiting on them to break out. I don't really think the Rangers need another one. And I think if they can bring in somebody like Tanner Jeannot, where if he flops, big deal. You know what? Okay, fine. He had a really good first season. You took a chance on a player and he had a sophomore slump and he never turned it around. And if he becomes a fourth line player for the rest of his career, so be it. But I think there's really a lot of potential to unlock a really good skill set in a player such as that. And I think the Rangers have a chip in Vitaly Kravtsov that other teams are going to be interested in. And if you're not using them, and I think this next week, Shades, is going to be really telling to see if Kravtsov is in the lineup at all. Because if he's not, then the answer is move him, because you're right. Because if he's not going to play, then why keep him on the roster, especially if you can bring in somebody who can help you by trading him out. If he does play, then I will sit here and say you were right. And, and Kravtsov's getting his chance, and Gallant, probably saw something, that he didn't see earlier on in the year. But I think it's a very interesting conversation. I really do.
Yeah, lastly, it's just my whole thing is just like Kravtsov was a 9th overall pick. Now, was he a little bit of a reach at the time? I think literally everyone agrees that that was a yes, and still is a yes. But at the same time, look at
15,
maybe
16.
Yeah, maybe. But NHL general managers, if there's one thing I've learned in the draft, if their guy is on the board, he's getting drafted. So, what I wanted to bring up, he was a 9th overall pick in 2018. Kakko was a 2nd overall pick in 2019. Laugh was 1st in 2020. Now, judging solely based on draft status, Kakko and Lafreniere, respectively, have not developed at the same rate that a number 2 and number 1 overall pick should. Now, I'm not comparing this solely to McDavid or Crosby because those are special circumstances, but other guys who have gone 1st overall, like Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, even like to an extent McKinnon, even though he's not at Crosby and McDavid level, but he's a little bit below them. Those two guys, especially Lafreniere, has not developed like a number 1 overall pick should. And this is his 3rd season. So you got to give players time. Every player develops differently. There is no linear progression that is universal when it comes to drafting and developing NHL prospects.
And I'll add 2 players, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Tyler Seguin. Remember the Boston Bruins in 2011, wanted to win a Stanley Cup and they ended up shipping out Tyler Seguin to Dallas, and he was a former number 1 overall pick, just a couple of years removed from, doing so. And it worked out well for Boston. But we've seen that Nugent Hopkins, again, I don't really think he's a number 1 overall pick type player, but he's an above average forward, and it puts up 65, 70 points a year. So again, everybody progresses differently, but for me, and I'll go back to what I said before to finish it up, Vitaly Kravtsov doesn't fit the Rangers timeline, and my mac and cheese is ready.
Dude, I've had you know what? I'm just going to make this the outro now because we talked about everything we've wanted to talk about. I've had so many people talk about mac and cheese the last few days. It's ridiculous. Like, I love it, but it's just like, it's incredible. Like, nobody was talking about mac and cheese. And then the last like 2 or 3 days, I've had like 6 people seemingly mention and talk about mac and cheese. So that was pretty funny right there.
Best.
Mac and cheese is really good. Actually, I'm
figured I'd
pretty sure I had some last night, actually.
there you go. I figured I'd end the podcast with a laugh. With a laugh.
Get out. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke that I would make. Jesus, man.
I hope you enjoy, everybody. I mean, we definitely upped the entertainment value this episode. A lot of joking around.
And we wore Rangers jerseys.
Who do you got? Come on, showcase it.
Number 30, baby.
And
number 10.
Number 10.
The King and the Bread Man.
That's right.
Yeah.
To play
All
alongside Vladdy Daddy.
Yes.
That's what I'm calling him.
Vladdy Daddy. Dear Lord. Vladdy Daddy. Scissor me daddy ass. To reference wrestling. To reference wrestling.
Yes. Yes.
No,
Let's preface that.
Hold on. Scissor me Vladdy ass.
There you go.
There we go. There we go.
Nice.
Anybody who doesn't watch wrestling is probably going, what the fuck are these two talking about right now?
Wrestling's fun sometimes, man.
Fun.
And so is hockey.
Well, hockey is yes, just yes.
Greatest sport on earth. Greatest sport on earth.
Well, in my opinion, yes.
Me and you both?
All right, I got nothing else. You got anything?
I'm good.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been, I somehow literally always forget to do this at the beginning of every episode, but this has been a surprise episode 34 of Pucks and Brews. Vladimir Tarasenko is a New York Ranger. Woohoo! I enjoyed my large cold brew that I got out of, I'm gonna say I got it out of necessity. I really just got it because I wanted to, because I was just extremely amped up. Vladimir Tarasenko. I don't drink yet unless the Rangers win the cup. Liam, you're invited to that party.
I'll be there, baby.
So follow us on our social medias listed in the description below. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And Liam, cheers number 5. Or at least I think it's number 5.
Cheers number 5, my friend. Take care. Brush your hair.
Okay, Cooge.